My uncle had a certain volume on his tool, and I couldn't resist. There, on that site, I experienced yet another interesting tale of infidelity, a story full of details and enigmas. My name is Emily, I'm 30 years old, and I've been married to Lucas, who's 34, for 5 years. We live in a comfortable house in Seattle. I work as an administrative assistant for a local office, and Lucas is a manager for a large corporation. But as they say, not all that glitters is gold. My relationship with Lucas cooled over the years. He was always dedicated to work, and the constant traveling meant that I spent a lot of time alone. Time and routine transformed our marriage into something closer to a business partnership than a love partnership. There was no longer that sparkle, and without the sparkle, the emptiness began to grow. It was in this scenario that Frank, Lucas's uncle, appeared. He was 52 years old, owned a successful construction company, and lived the lifestyle that most people dream of: imported cars, expensive clothes, international trips, and of course that charm of an older, successful, and self-confident man. Frank has always been an important figure in Lucas's family. He helped my husband get the job he has today and was always present at family parties and Sunday lunches. But we had never exchanged more than casual conversations. I didn't know that monotonous life would bring me a new experience until one day everything changed. It was a rainy late afternoon when Frank called me. Lucas was on one of his business trips, and Frank asked to come over to our house to talk about some investments he was making. I was surprised by the phone call, but I tried not to show it. "Sure, Frank. You can come over whenever you want." I tried to sound casual, even though I felt something different about that call. After hanging up, I quickly tidied up the house, a little anxious. It was just Frank, Lucas's uncle, right? Nothing special. Frank arrived with his imposing presence, wearing an expensive suit and wearing a confident smile, the kind that always made me feel a certain admiration, although I would never admit it. He came in, sat down in the living room, and we started talking. At first, it was just about business, investments, and some comments about Lucas's travels. But at some point, the conversation took a more personal turn. "Emily, are you and Lucas okay?" Frank asked directly, looking at me with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. I felt embarrassed, but I tried to hide it. "Yes, we are. Just the usual routine. You know, work, home," I replied, feeling like he knew more than I was saying. Frank was watching me carefully. It wasn't that casual look, it was something more intense, as if he was reading every thought I was trying to hide. And then he moved a little closer to the couch, relaxing as the mood in the room began to change. "Lucas has always been very focused on work. But what about you, Emily? Are you happy?" he asked in a tone of voice that took me by surprise. The question was so direct that it completely disarmed me. It was as if, at that moment, Frank was touching a wound that I had been trying to ignore for a long time. I was silent for a few seconds, not knowing how to respond. Frank, noticing my hesitation, placed his hand on mine in a subtle way. That touch was enough to make my heart stop. It wasn't something vulgar, far from it, but there was an energy in that gesture that I hadn't felt in years. "Lucas is a good man, Emily, but sometimes life leaves us wanting for other things, doesn't it?" Frank said calmly, calculating word by word. I knew that from that moment on, something was about to change. The rain outside was only getting heavier, beating against the windows, and the atmosphere seemed to create an almost cinematic atmosphere. The soft light in the room, the sound of water running down the glass, and the two of us sitting there, much closer than we should be. My body was tense, but at the same time there was a curiosity inside me that I couldn't ignore. Frank, a man 20 years older, rich, powerful, and somehow dangerously charming, was about to cross a line I had never imagined. "Frank?" I started to say, but he placed a finger gently on my lips in a gesture that silenced me completely. "Don't say anything now, Emily. Just think about what you really want." And in that moment, with the heavy rain outside and the tension in the air, I knew I was on the verge of a decision that could change everything. I took a deep breath and backed away a little, trying to regain control. "Frank, I think you should go. Lucas will be here soon and I won't." Frank smiled sideways, but it wasn't an arrogant smile. It was something deeper, as if he already knew exactly what I was feeling. I understand, Emily. I'm not going to pressure you, but I just want you to know one thing. He slowly turned to look at me again. You deserve more. More than this lonely life. More than waiting for something that may never come. Those words echoed in my head because deep down I knew he was right. Lucas was a good man, but our relationship had become mechanical. I'm going, Emily, but if you ever want to talk, look for me. You know where to find me. He grabbed his coat and walked toward the door, but before he left, he gave one last look as if he were leaving something unfinished, waiting for the right moment to resume. When the door closed behind him, I was left alone in the room. The sound of the rain now muffled by the distance, my thoughts were racing. I knew that this was just the beginning. Something had been planted that night, and as much as I wanted to resist, there was a part of me that yearned for what might happen. The following days were a mix of expectation and restlessness. Lucas came back from his trip and everything seemed to be back to routine, but nothing was the same for me anymore. I tried to act normal, but thoughts of Frank kept coming back to me. Then, one afternoon, an unexpected message popped up on my phone. I'm in town. Can I see you? It was Frank. My heart raced, and even though I knew it was wrong, I replied, Yes, we can talk. We met at a discreet cafe, far from downtown Seattle. Frank was sitting there, elegant as always, and greeted me with that enigmatic smile. I sat across from him, nervousness taking over me, but at the same time, a part of me was looking forward to that moment. I knew you'd come, Emily, he said unhurriedly, stirring his coffee. I just needed time. I took a deep breath. Frank, I don't know what I'm doing here. He smiled slightly, leaning in a little closer. You know, Emily, you know exactly what you're doing here, and so do I. That afternoon at the cafe was the turning point. We didn't say much, but the looks and the interludes spoke louder than any words could. I knew I was entering dangerous territory, but curiosity and desire were stronger than any sense of guilt I might feel. As we left the cafe, Frank came closer, holding my hand for a brief moment. Do you want to stop by my place in another city? You can leave your car here and we'll take mine. I was silent for a few seconds, but awkwardly I replied, I don't know if I should go. I'm worried. I hope it's quick and nothing happens, if you know what I mean. Frank kept his composure and replied, I promise to be quick. It's just to pass the time today and go for a walk. At that moment, I got into his car. An absurd feeling of comfort that I didn't even know what car it was. It was too technological for me. And in 20 minutes, we were there, at his new place. When I arrived, I felt very comfortable while he showed me the place. Something was pulsing in my heart. At one point, he showed me a room in the house with a new bed, and, to my surprise, Frank looked at me and I noticed a certain volume in his tool. I started to feel something different. I realized that something was about to happen. Frank just said, Don't say anything, just live intensely. He got closer, and I couldn't resist. I picked up his tool and had no idea that my uncle was doing very well, despite being older. Already undressed, I let him put the tool in while I carefully picked it up. And we stayed there for about an hour. I didn't know that, despite being 52 years old, he had a tool that worked well, measuring 24 centimeters, and I confess, bigger than my husband's. I was filled with pleasure and moaned twice. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. When I finished that, a feeling of worry took over me. I had to make a decision. After a few days, I decided to leave, to experience something new with Uncle Frank. I called my husband to talk and told him that it was time to end it all. Without understanding, he remained silent for a few minutes, but I kept my composure and stood there listening to my husband say, Why? But it was no use. I had already made up my mind. Lucas, you didn't cherish our moments. Now it's my time to leave. A tear ran down his eye. I picked up my suitcase and said I would come back later to sort everything out. And that's what I did. I got in my car and went to live with Frank. Whether I did the right thing or not, I hope you understand this decision, because I had my reasons. And this was yet another story of infidelity. Subscribe and leave your comment.